All right, welcome. This is the intro and overview to this big resource I'm working on. This is a massive project integrating mindfulness, meditation, and many psychotherapy modalities, all for the benefit of healing, well-being, growth, all of that. I think it'd be good to start off with why I'm making this, why I decided to make this resource. The first is that I'm obsessed with these things. I've been studying growth modalities, meditation, psychotherapy for almost 2 decades now, and I'm most obsessed with learning what practices actually work for our healing and growth. On this journey, I quickly learned that there's a lot of great books out there, there's a lot of great people talking the talk, but not a lot of great people giving the actual step-by-step practices that are actually going to impact and change people's lives. So this obsession led me to become a meditation teacher and a therapist. And through working with all sorts of different clients and all sorts of different challenges and situations in life, I've learned that there are very different things that work for different people at different times. Now, ideally, people could have a really great, well-rounded therapist that could guide them through this process of healing and growth and doing all these practices and reflections. But the reality is, first, a lot of therapists or even meditation teachers have a very narrow scope of expertise. So if what you need doesn't align with what they offer, you're kind of out of luck. And then secondly, a lot of people cannot afford psychotherapy or any sort of one-on-one mentorship or help. I know a lot of people like myself who have been more or less self-guided in their healing and growth process, and it's like a full-time job to figure out all the teachers, all of the different programs, all of the different methods. First of all, it can be very expensive, but even if you could afford it or find free resources, it's overwhelming. There's so much there. A lot of people just don't have the time and patience and energy to devote to this, and the reality is that the people who need this most, the people who most need help, are the ones with the least resources, the least able to, dive deep into these topics and discern what is going to be most helpful for them. And so this project is my attempt to pull from many different modalities and traditions and make a real comprehensive resource that addresses the main areas that people need help and the main areas that people get stuck. I found that most modalities work for about 60 to 70% of the people who try them out. And it's great for the people that these modalities work for, but what about the people the modalities don't work for? And I'm one of those people. I'm one of the people who tried many things and they didn't work. And through my hard work and learning, I started to understand why they weren't working for me. And I've worked with so many clients who have done these sorts of work, who have worked with other therapists, who have engaged in a lot of meditation, and have still found themselves to be stuck. And usually within a session or two, we can really locate why they're stuck, and I can give them the practices to start to work on that. So if you are someone who often finds yourself stuck and finds that practices and healing modalities often don't work for you, I think you will find answers in this resource. And if you don't, please write to me. Let me know exactly where you're stuck, what you're challenged with, and I will either point you to what practices I think will be helpful, or I will create new practices and add to this resource. I imagine this resource will continue to grow and evolve over time, or at least that is my intention with it. And now one more point on healing and growth that I really want to make central and will be mentioned throughout this program or these programs is that the real healing and growth happens through living in life. That these practices provide the baseline of understanding and support to set you up to live in a way that is going to be healing and going to support you in your growth. I've seen this time and time again with clients, with myself, with friends, that we do not live in a vacuum, that we are intimately connected to our environment, and that healing doesn't happen just from one therapy session a week or anything like that. Those things can be instrumental. They can be catalysts to the larger healing, but the larger healing happens through how you show up in life. So there's going to be a lot of practices and contemplations in this program to kind of prompt you to reflect on how you show up in life and how you would like to show up in life. And there will be a lot of strategies around how to implement those things and get over the barriers and challenges. So that's a very general intro to what I'm trying to do here. And I'm also making this available all for free for many reasons. One, so people actually utilize it, so it gets out there. And another is because often the people who most need the healing are the ones who are least able to afford it. And that's just sad and heartbreaking. And I wanted to do something about that. If you would like to support this project, you can support me on Patreon. There's going to be links in the descriptions. I'm going to speak a bit more about that at the end, but really no pressure to support. I'm really happy if you just utilize this and you share it so others may utilize it as well. So thank you for being here and listening. So the way I'm doing this is right now I've released one practice from each module. The first practice that is essentially an intro to the idea of each module, but the modules go much, much, much deeper. So stay tuned as I release practice by practice, module by module, and please be patient. It's a lot of work. It's taken me a long time, and I have to get the tracks produced and everything, but I'm super committed. I'm making it happen. So the first module is Fundamentals of Wellbeing. It is really the foundation of well-being. It has really the core ideas and practice of mindfulness in there. And it also draws a lot from existential psychology, which I love, which we get more into later in this. Existential psychology essentially saying that purpose helps us get through life. So there are many practices here that really ground you into the basics of mindfulness and just the perspective that is going to be beneficial going forward in life, but also going forward in this program. The second module is essentially about healing trauma or nervous system health and well-being. This is so fundamental. Luckily, there's a lot more awareness around it now. There's a lot more trauma-informed perspectives and practitioners. Essentially, if you're often overwhelmed, stress, anxiety, if your nervous system is just burnt out, this is where you start. It is first and foremost understanding trauma, understanding our nervous system, understanding how it all works. And through that understanding, we can start to relate to it in a new way. And that new way that we relate to our nervous system, our body, our being, our various parts, makes us feel more safe and more okay with what's going on. When we don't understand what's going on internally, it can be extremely overwhelming. It can be destabilizing. Our inner world can be chaotic. There are often lots of parts that are in conflict with one another. So as we start to understand our parts and our body and our inner reactivity and our nervous system and our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, we can actually naturally bring more inner harmony to our parts and to our inner world in general. People who often feel unsafe in their lives, especially early in life, become disembodied, where we kind of become removed from the felt sense of being in our body. So a lot of this is about re-embodying safely. The key to all of this stuff is never pushing through these boundaries or barriers. We work slowly and compassionately and allow things to kind of melt and open at their own pace. This module draws on somatic psychology, a few different modalities, and also largely on IFS, internal family systems, which is one of the fastest growing psychotherapy modalities because it is super effective and super helpful for people to start to understand their inner world and these various parts that we have that often cause problems or seem troublesome. IFS offers a whole new way of learning about our parts, relating to them, and becoming embodied safely. The next module is on compassion, self-compassion, forgiveness, and the inner critic. This is a huge topic that almost everyone struggles with, so I really wanted to devote a whole module to it to really get into, one, why our inner critic is so intense, and two, why self-compassion is so hard to cultivate and what barriers get in the way. So I've done a lot of work with this with clients. I've developed a lot of strategies to overcoming the barriers to self-compassion. And so I'm very excited to present this because a lot of the practices are kind of unique to me, or at least I put my own twist on them. The next module is Feeling is Healing. This is fundamental. This is really how a lot of the real healing and integration work happens, is just through feeling the emotions. The problem is there are so many good reasons to not feel our feelings. Often our feelings are overwhelming, they're extremely painful or uncomfortable. So we become habitually dissociated or repressing of our feelings. The thing is, when something is in our unconscious, when it's repressed, it actually has more weight. It has more power over us. And so by feeling the feelings, by inviting them, we actually liberate them. We integrate them, or we become free of them. Now, the previous two modules set you up to go into this because, as you probably know, it is not easy to be with uncomfortable feelings. Every part of us wants to avoid and repress uncomfortable feelings. So the previous two modules really give us a lot of the skills, and then this module will walk us through a lot of the practices to figure out what our core feelings are, our complexes. Essentially, we have these core feelings, like let's say we may have a feeling of being inadequate. And we may have many experiences tied to this feeling of inadequacy throughout our life that reinforce that feeling. Now, we don't need to go re-experiencing every experience and feeling the inadequacy. What we need to do instead is to just get to that core feeling of inadequacy and know that it is okay to feel that way, but it doesn't mean it's true. So one of the core things in this module, it comes from Buddhism, but it's also present in a lot of psychotherapy modalities, is this idea that we can feel things fully without identifying with them. So we can allow ourselves to feel the pain of feeling inadequate, but also see that we are not inadequate. We don't have to believe our feelings of being true. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They keep their feelings at bay because they think that their feelings are true, or they think that inviting their feelings validates their feelings as being true. Yes, we want to validate our feelings because they are true. It's true that something in life made us feel that way, but it is not true that that's who we are. So that's a really key part of the feeling is healing, and the other piece is just feeling safe to go into them. So there are a lot of practices, often visiting our inner child, this kind of past version of ourselves, and connecting with what they're feeling so we can process all of the repressed feelings from childhood, but also the feelings that arise throughout our lives. The other big piece here is attachment. You may have heard of attachment theory. It's one of the kind of biggest, most widespread and validated theories in psychology. But we're not very good at healing people's attachment systems. It's only in the last few years that people have really come out with some really effective practices for healing attachment. So I'm also very excited to present those. Essentially, if we didn't have secure attachment figures, people we really trusted, then we didn't feel safe to have our feelings. We didn't feel safe to be in distress, to feel all the array of uncomfortable emotions. And so there's a big connection between attachment and trauma. And if we want to heal trauma, we also have to heal attachment. So I draw from a lot of different modalities in this section, but specifically for the attachment stuff, I draw from Daniel P. Brown, his book, Attachment Disturbances in Adults, which presents a really brilliant practice called the Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, which if you're keen, you can kind of research that on your own. So I'm going to present that with a lot of other complementary practices for doing that like real gritty, deep healing emotional work. The next module is one of my favorites. I love all of these, but this one is something I've personally gotten into very deep because it's something I was challenged with for many years and didn't find a lot of great resources until later in life. The topic is values, identity, meaning. It's essentially a lot of depth psychology, existential psychology, and adult developmental psychology. The basic idea is that we build up an identity, a sense of self, early in life to help us make it in the world, to help us feel a sense of belonging, a sense of validation. But at some point, that identity becomes restrictive and limiting. It limits us from exploring and expressing deeper, more authentic parts of ourselves. We essentially build up our original identity as like the suit of armor that protects us in a scary world, helps us find a sense of belonging, it helps us connect with others, and helps us feel a sort of sameness, helps us find commonalities with others. But later in life, as we start to mature and really become adults, not just like age-wise, but internally become a mature adult, then our life is much more about figuring out who we really are as individuals, not who we are as a collective, but what unique thing do we have to offer the world. And it's so common that the pressures to fit in and to be successful and to look good or to have some social status keep us from really truly exploring who we really are and what we really want to do with our lives. So this module is very much about bringing into awareness this whole kind of narrative of our development and how we've developed, to look at it compassionately. It's very necessary to develop in this way. And then to begin to unburden ourselves, to start to see through the limitations, the beliefs of who we are that keep us from really growing and exploring and being creative with our self-expression. So there will be a lot of pulling things together from different perspectives, and I'm super excited to work on and make this module. Now, the next module is on empowerment and boundaries. So often early in life, if our needs weren't met, if we didn't get the care and the validation that we really needed as children, we often think there's something wrong with us. And this often leads to a sense of disempowerment, that we don't embody or own our own sense of power because we don't think we deserve to or have the right to, or we just don't think we're good. Like, there's countless reasons we come to believe that we shouldn't own our power. It may feel dangerous, or we may have negative associations with power because of other people who were bullies or used power against people. But this module is very much about owning a really healthy, embodied sense of empowerment. And a big way that this is done is through boundaries, through saying no, through knowing what we will and will not accept. To put up boundaries is very empowering, and people who have been abused or their boundaries weren't respected early in life often have a poor sense of boundaries. So in this module, we explore how to set up healthy boundaries and what the fears and resistances are to doing that, and how we can actually do it in a way that makes our relationships better. Because often we fear that boundaries are going to make our relationships worse, but it's completely the opposite. When you set boundaries in a healthy way, in a way that is respectful for you and the other, it really lays the foundation for mutual respect, for consent, for just a healthy relationship in general. And ultimately, this leads to a healthy sense of power and self-trust, which is essential. Self-trust is so important on this journey and will be touched on throughout the various modules. The next module is gratitude and contentment, which is really about cultivating wholesome states of mind. This is where we get really into meditative traditions and their approach and how effective they can be for our well-being. Now, many people try to jump right into this section, and that's fine. It's totally great too. But the barriers that come up in this section are pretty common, and the previous modules will address those. So there is an ordering to this. You can jump in anywhere you want, but the idea is that the nervous system issues, emotional challenges, things around identity are really going to limit your ability to sink into pure contentment and gratitude and all of these other good things. That we can definitely go there, and it's good to kind of try these practices out because they could be very effective. But what often happens is people kind of hit a wall or a limitation with how far these practices can take them. And that is because there's some inner blockages that we need to then work through emotionally. And once we do that, it really frees up our energy, and we can go so much deeper into the other practices around gratitude, around compassion, around just being okay with the moment, just pure contentment. The next module is thinking and habits. It's just looking at our habitual patterns and how we can change them. And again, the way that people often don't make progress in this area is that they don't work with the underlying feelings. So first you address the underlying feelings because those are motivating your avoidances or your addictive behaviors. And then once you address the underlying feelings, it really opens up the space to create new, better habits. And then this is, again, another mistake that people often make is that they do all the healing work, but then they don't set up a better routine for themselves. They don't set up better habits. And then because they're not really addressing the bad habits directly, they end up in the same place that they were before. So you really need to address the underlying motivating feelings. But then you also need to look at practically how can you change your behavior? How can you form better habits that are more supportive, that are really resonant with your values? Okay, and the last module is freedom and wholeness. It's really going deep into kind of the meditative perspective, and it's going deep into these practices that are super amazingly transformative. Once all that other stuff is out of the way, we can recognize our own innate wholeness and just be in the freedom of life, be in this space of inner freedom. Now, a lot of kind of new agey gurus teach this specific approach. It's basically actually like old Buddhist Tantra, where you imagine yourself as being fully embodied, fully awesome in every way, like you like the perfect version of yourself. You imagine yourself embodying that. And that is actually Buddhist Tantra, sort of. So the whole difference is, in Buddhism, you're not trying to control reality. And this is a weird kind of thing. You're not trying to reject how you're feeling. You're actually fully embracing how you're feeling. You're fully embracing the moment, but you're also trying to cultivate a more clear or more true perspective. And you can cultivate that truer perspective by embodying these awakened states of mind. So in this section, we're doing like a sort of a Buddhist Tantra practice, and it's really about cultivating the best, most expressed or most embodied or most uninhibited version of yourself. I don't know the right words here because those all have connotations that aren't quite right, but it's like embodying your capital S self. You're the truest, most authentic, most mature, grounded version of yourself, but not doing that at the rejection of other parts of yourself. And this is the key. This is where other New Age teachers kind of go wrong, in my opinion. Joe Dispenza, where there's this kind of rejection of these past versions of yourself. And that can get you in a lot of trouble. It can create these inner conflicts. It can create all sorts of disappointment when things don't change, or it can create feelings of inadequacy if these practices aren't really landing, if you're not really taking to them. So first, we start with this radical self-acceptance. And through that, we cultivate our most ideal selves. What we're really doing is we're really tuning into our innate wholeness. So we're not actually trying to change anything. We're just trying to get to the core of our wholeness that is who we actually are. So this stuff I really love. I truly love these practices, and I practice them a lot myself. The only thing I see is often people getting stuck because of a lot of the teachers teaching these types of practices in extremely unhelpful ways that I think are often even harmful, where people are starting to really like subtly reject certain parts of themselves. They're really kind of closing parts down, which is really not about that. It's actually about opening more parts up. And it's also about being very skillful about how you work with the feelings that arise through this process. And all of these kinds of previous modules address those things. So that's an overview of everything I'm going to offer with this project. Yes, it's a lot. Yes, it's going to take me a while. Please be patient, but also thank you for your support. The first 9 practices, so 1 for each module, are out. There's links in the description. And thank you so much for staying tuned for this video. And if you would like to support or learn more about this project, you can go to my Patreon. The support is so much appreciated. Just $5 a month is really helping me going. And it's also, I just love to see people supporting. It really motivates me, inspires me. Even just commenting on the videos is super inspiring, keeps me motivated because it is a lot of work to keep going on. But I'm really committed because I really feel like this is what the world needs. I encounter so often people who are kind of lost or kind of into one modality of practice, but they kind of hit a wall. And so this is really offering this larger perspective so they can kind of find that traction again and keep their healing work or growth work going. Oh, also one last shout out to the producer who produced these first 9 tracks, Marshall Drägun. He's a friend of mine. He's an awesome producer. Check him out. Links in the descriptions to hear more of his music. Also, Ananda, Enns, another good friend who's a brilliant artist who did the artwork for this. You can check out her website where she sells her artwork, and she does commissions, and they're quite affordable, and her prints are only $50 Canadian, and she has some really super beautiful ones. So yes, check them out, support them, and thank you for your presence.